So I've got both the Switch 1 and the Switch 2 in front of me right now. And I'm basically going to be answering the question on whether it's worth keeping the Switch 1 when you get a Switch 2, or if you can just sell the Switch 1 and play all your Switch games on the Switch 2. So the Switch 2 can play the majority of Switch 1 games just fine, but the question is it going to be able to run the Switch 1 games as well as a Switch 1 can run them, basically? Is it going to look fine? Is it going to play fine on the larger screen, on the 1080p screen? Is it going to look blurry for some of the games? And of course, some games are unsupported, but from what I've seen, most of the games I have are supported, and we're going to be testing out a few of them. This isn't like a regular Switch, this is a Switch OLED. I don't have my original Switch anymore, and there's no real reason to have it because the Switch OLED is just the same console but with an OLED screen. So I'm going to start with Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. So we're going to first of all play one race on the Switch, and we're going to check basically how it runs and how it looks. So we're just going to do a single player, do Grand Prix 150cc, and let's see how it runs and how it looks. Obviously, we're all kind of used to this stuff. We're all used to playing on a Switch 1 for Mario Kart 8, so it's not really going to be surprising for anyone. It looks just fine. It looks really good on the OLED Switch. I'm basically going to be testing the backward compatibility of the Switch 2. Because if the games aren't going to run as good as they do on the base Switch 1, then it might be worth just keeping your Switch 1 even when you do get a Switch 2. Did not mean to throw that red shell. I kind of feel not very good at this game after playing Mario Kart World. It feels a bit weird because the drifting is very different in Mario Kart World. Alright, there we go. Now we're going to play on the same exact track, but we're going to play on the Switch 2 instead. So the game does not look any less sharp than it did on the Switch 1, honestly. If anything, it looks sharper on the Switch 2. It might just be me thinking that. Either way, it definitely does not look worse. So let's go ahead and play. I'm gonna play the exact same track. And then after this, we will test out a couple third-party games as well. So I'm not sure if this version is running at like the docked resolution, like 1080p, whilst we're playing in handheld, but I can tell you right now, the game does not look any worse than it does on the OLED Switch. In fact, the larger screen and the better screen makes the game look better. I don't think the game supports HDR though. It definitely does not support HDR. So it doesn't look worse. It does not look better, but the screen is larger. And 720p on a 1080p screen usually should look terrible, but I have a feeling this game is not running at 720p on the Switch 2. It seems like it's running at 1080p, or at least maybe it's being upscaled to 1080p somehow, but it does not look blurry at all. But you be the judge of that. Alright, there we go. So for Mario Kart 8, honestly, it is a very similar experience. I would not hold on to my Switch OLED for this game, but there are a lot of other games. There are a lot of third-party games. If we do something like Dark Souls Remastered, okay? So Dark Souls Remastered ran at 720p 30 FPS, if I'm not mistaken, on the original Switch. So I have not loaded up Dark Souls 1 yet, or Dark Souls Remastered on the Switch 2. But let's see how it runs, since it is a third-party game. So maybe it will be a bit blurry, maybe it won't run or look as good on the Switch 2 than playing on an original Switch or a Switch OLED. Right now, from the text, it does not look blurry at all. I don't know if these games are running like the docked version. Let's see how the game... I mean, I imagine this game is still going to be capped at 30 FPS. The Switch 2 can definitely handle this game at 60 FPS, 1080p 60. But yeah, it is still capped at 30 FPS. But is it blurry? It doesn't look particularly blurry. I did not even mean to parry that guy. I was trying to block with my shield. I haven't played a Souls game in a long time, so I used the wrong button. But I mean, the game looks, I mean, it looks like I'm playing it on a Switch OLED. It's just a larger Switch. So it stays true to the original Switch, if that makes sense. It doesn't look any worse, doesn't feel any worse. The text, when you read the little Estes Flash text, it doesn't look particularly sharp, but I don't know if that's also the case on a Switch OLED or on a normal Switch. But it seems to be running as I remember it running on a regular Switch or a Switch OLED. So really, even for a game like this, there's no real reason to keep your Switch One, and you can definitely consider selling it for a game like this. So you want to keep your Switch One, you can definitely do that, but this is mainly just to see if you have to keep it for your Switch One games, or if you can get away with selling it and just using your Switch 2 to play all your Switch 1 games via backwards compatibility. That's what we're basically testing here. We're testing the backwards compatibility of the Switch 2, and it seems to be pretty good so far. We have tested quite big games, right? Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, best-selling game on the Switch, and then we've tested Dark Souls Remastered, which is probably one of the best-selling third-party games on the Switch. However, the best-selling third-party game on the Switch is actually Minecraft, if I'm not mistaken. So how does Minecraft run on the Switch 2? It doesn't have a Switch 2 version, and I do have this game on the cartridge, so we'll have to put the actual cartridge in. Let's see how this game runs. Oh, we need to update it. Let me know if you do have any specific games you want to see tested, or any specific games you'd like to see the comparison between the Switch 1 or Switch 2. But from what it looks like, all the Nintendo Switch games seem to be running the exact same on the Switch 2 via backwards compatibility. At least the ones that are supported, they seem to be running just fine. They don't look blurry on the 1080p screen. I don't know if it's forcing the docked resolution. I don't know if it's somehow upscaling them to 1080p. I don't know how it actually works, but they do not look blurry at all. And again, usually 720p on a 1080p screen would look terrible. It would be very obvious, so I don't know what they're doing here, but they have pretty much exceeded my expectations with the backwards compatibility. It is unfortunate that games that are locked at 30 FPS stay at 30 FPS, but you can say that about games on the PS5 as well. Like, think about games like Bloodborne that still run at 1080p 30 FPS on the PS5. In fact, even the PS5 Pro runs that game at 1080p 30 FPS, which is kind of ridiculous. I'm pretty sure this game is still going to be kept at the same render distance, same FPS. Alright, so right now the game does not look blurry at all, so it looks fine. So I have all the graphic settings turned up to the default settings, right? I'm not going to turn off any of the fancy graphics or anything like that. I'm going to keep the render distance at the maximum amount. I think the Switch 2 should handle it. It's still pretty low as it is. And we'll keep the frame rate at unlimited, which should be 60 FPS, essentially. So then let's press play, and let's create a new world. I did have a survival world on the Switch 2, but we're going to do a fresh world. So first of all, let's see how long it actually takes to create the world. So this is definitely slower than something like actually, it's not really that much slower than a PS5, to be honest. I don't know why I'm Alex. There we go, with Steve now. And so the game seems to be running at 60 FPS. This is definitely not 30 FPS. It is a brand new world, so there's not much going on. But then again, with a new world, it actually might be even better of a test, since stuff needs to load in for the first time. So right now, it seems to be running a lot better than the Switch 1 version. And it looks it looks perfectly sharp. Like, this looks like it's 1080p, honestly. It looks like it's running at the full resolution on Switch 2. I'm not sure how it will look docked. I'm not sure if it will look fine on a 4K screen, you know, with the resolution set to 4K. I'm not sure if it will upscale to that. I don't think it will, honestly. But one thing's for sure, these Switch 1 backwards compatible games don't seem to be running any worse than they did on these. If you play them on Switch 1, you're not getting any worse of an experience from what I can see so far, at least from the supported games. Obviously, if you have a few games that you really like that are unsupported on the Switch 2, then obviously keep your Switch 1. But for games that are supported, you should be good on selling your Switch 1, honestly, and just playing them on Switch 2, if that's something you're interested in doing. I'm not going to kill the rabbit, sorry. But even just sprinting through, obviously I'll test the loading times with the Elytra. Wow, look at this chicken. But yeah, it's definitely 60 FPS. It doesn't it doesn't feel like it's dropping. It doesn't feel bad at all. But let's see if we switch to creative, grab an Elytra, and let's see how the game loads in. So it's still running at 60 FPS. Still looks sharp, still looks fine, but obviously stuff isn't really loading in very well. I don't know if this is any better than the Switch 1 version, honestly. It seems just as bad when it comes to loading in things. And if we go really fast with an Elytra, then you pretty much don't really know where you're going. Let's be real. I can't actually see anything. But it's not worse than the Switch 1 version, so it's still probably better to play this game on Switch 2 anyway. If we then do a TNT test, let's do a TNT test. Let's just blow up some TNT. Let's see how the game handles it. Honestly, that should be enough. I know I can use commands and whatnot, but I don't think it's going to be necessary. So it dropped a little bit to like 20, 25 FPS. That's what it felt like for a second. Sorry, not 20, 25 FPS. It felt something like 45, 50 FPS. That's what it felt like. But yeah, the game seems to be fairly smooth. Again, you are capped at that 12 chunk render distance, which is kind of crap, but it's still playable. It's still fine. And the game doesn't look blurry or anything at all. So Minecraft, again, probably better to play it on a Switch 2. You don't really need to keep your Switch 1 for this game. It seems fine. But let me know if you want to see any other specific games being tested out. These are the current games I have on my Switch 2. So if anything seems interesting, just let me know. And I will be buying more games, obviously, as time goes on. But from what I can see for now, there's no real reason to keep your Switch 1 unless it's just because you want to keep it just for yourself. But if you are interested in selling it and you were worried if maybe some of the Switch 1 games aren't going to run as good as well on the Switch 2, well, if your game is supported on the Switch 2, it will probably run just fine on the Switch 2. The backwards compatibility seems to be really, really good. And these games that I've tested do not have any free upgrades or paid upgrades for the Switch 2. They are literally running the base Switch 1 versions on the Switch 2. But that's pretty much it. Let me know if you want to see any other type of content or comparisons between the Switch 2 or the Switch 1 and the Switch 1. But that's going to be it. I'll see you all in the next video.